help me introduce Amy Waninger. So before we bring her officially onto invite her to share, I want to give her official bio. Amy C. Waninger works with organizations across the country to build inclusive cultures and diverse leadership pipelines. She is the author of multiple books, including Network Beyond Bias, Making Diversity a Competitive Advantage for Your Career. Amy is a professional member of National Speakers Association and a Pro-C certified change practitioner. Her other credentials include 2 degrees from Indiana University and, most importantly, a World's Best Mom coffee mug. So help me welcome Amy. Amy, hello. Thank you for being here.
Hello, Natasha. Thank you for having me. I'm excited.
So thrilled. And I am going to start the conversation with this because I just think it's hilarious. So I was asking Amy, how do I pronounce your last name? She was like, it's Amy Waninger. Like, you'll be wanting her back on your show. And I just had to share that because it brought me so much joy, and it's wonderful.
Thank you so much.
Well, we heard your bio. We'd love to hear from you to introduce yourself in your own way.
Sure. So I actually did not start out in the DEI space like so many of us who find ourselves here. I came from passion, not by circumstance. But I actually spent 20 years in information technology and the last 12 of those in the insurance industry. So I've worked for, small software companies, Fortune 100 companies, kind of everywhere in between. In 2012, the company I was working for hired a chief diversity officer. And I thought, oh man, I wonder what they do and how do I get involved? And I volunteered for everything they would let me attend, everything they would let me do. And I was really trying to find a path for myself from where I was to that organization. And really no path existed. I wasn't in the right office. Didn't have the right bona fides. But I did uncover a bit of what I felt like was a gap in the DEI space, which was, how do ordinary people who are not in charge of policies, not in charge of hiring, not in charge of, whatever in a corporation, right? Just, if you're a little cog in a big machine, how can you make a difference in this space? And I set out to solve that problem and, came up with the concepts in my book, Network Beyond Bias, around how to look at your own network and figure out, are you putting the work in? Are you showing up in places where you can create opportunity, for yourself and others? And really the work that I did around that book before it was even going to be a book changed the whole course of my career, changed my whole life. And I set out on a path to share that with as many people as possible.
Very cool. Well, I'd love to jump, into the work specifically that you're doing now with your organization lead at any level. And so if you could tell us a little bit about the work that you're doing there in the consulting and training world.
Yeah, so I have, it's not just me anymore. This year, I've added to my team. Thank you. It's exciting and terrifying. Growth is always scary, but I've added to my team as well. I have about a dozen associate consultants now, and we do assessments, consulting, training, and coaching, and keynotes around inclusive leadership. And so our tagline, kind of our guiding principle at Lead at Any Level, is that leaders can be anywhere and should be everywhere. And so we really focus on developing leaders from wherever they are in the organization so that they can, kind of as they rise in an organization, bring more people with them.
I love it. Leaders should be anywhere and everywhere. We are also firm believers of that at NWC. So I'd love to jump into your book a little bit and,
Sure.
Just like the title of your book, How Do We Network Without Bias? What does that look like?
Yeah. So the first thing that when I'm doing this work, if I have an audience, I usually start with a little bit about, how do we really make decisions? Because we all know in this space, right, that unconscious bias kind of shapes our decision-making in ways that we don't readily recognize. But I actually have an assessment tool in the book where you can figure out like who's in my network today and how different are they from me. And so I have this model that I call Network Like a Champ. And each letter of CHAMP stands for a different kind of person that you need in your network. So if you have note paper near you, just grab it real quick and write the word CHAMP, stack the letters. So C is for a customer, somebody outside your organization that chooses to do business with your company or maybe doesn't. Internal customers don't count, but it has to be a real person that you can talk to and gain insights from. Everybody should have a customer in their network because they are privy to information about your organization that you don't have from the inside. And also about what your competitors are doing, right? Because they've probably researched them better than you have. The H is for someone you've hired or helped get a job. Most of us want a really high value network. And the best way to have a high value network is to be of value to the people already in our networks. So even if you're not a hiring manager, you can write a letter of recommendation, you can introduce someone, make a warm referral, that sort of thing. And so it just kind of goes from there, right? The 5 connections that you need in your network. And then we look at what perspectives does your network ignore, who's missing and why. And it really, once you see it on paper, it really hits home that most of us do not do the job that we think we're doing in building a good, diverse and robust network. Most people, if you ask them, how diverse is your network? They say, oh, it's really, really good. And one of my favorite activities is to, grab a Starbucks napkin or whatever's handy and kind of go through the exercise and kind of watch the transformation as people realize, oh, I can be doing more. I always tell folks, your heart can't be in the right place if you never move your feet. This work is not about how you feel or how you think. It's about what you do and where you show up.
Agreed. And, I'd love to know, you were talking a little bit about the unconscious bias piece of things, but in what ways does unconscious bias manifest itself in our networks? Why is that a problem? I mean, this community probably knows, but if you could elaborate a little bit why that's problematic.
Yeah. So, excuse me. So, we tend to go where we're most comfortable, right? We tend to surround ourselves with people whose identities, values, and experiences match ours, right? We tend to make judgments about people who don't fall into those same categories, right? We choose our experiences in ways that reinforce all those things that we already believe to be true. And what happens is it makes our world pretty small, right? We tend to get in our own little bubbles. And what I ask people to do is to shift their mindset a little bit, because I don't believe that leaders can always be where they're comfortable. We can't always do what's easiest. We can't always rely on our defaults. What leaders need to do is actively seek out perspectives that are different from our own. Because when leaders make decisions, it affects more people than just us, right? And so if we can, talk to people whose identities differ from ours, who prioritize their values differently, who have different lived experiences, who maybe have judgments about situations or people that are different from ours, we can start to incorporate more of those perspectives into our own decision making. And that allows us to make better decisions for the most people as much of the time as possible. Those are the kinds of leaders we usually aspire to follow. And I think those are the kinds of leaders we should aspire to be. So what I ask people to do is break apart and really look at how comfortable are you in your own network, and poke at it a little bit. Go to places where you may be the only, especially if, for people who are, in the dominant culture, who are overrepresented in their organizations. Men can go to the women's groups and glean some insights there. White people can go to, the African American or Asian American groups or Hispanic groups to glean information. Straight people can go to the LGBT groups and learn about the struggles of that organization. People who are able-bodied can show up in spaces, where disability and access are being discussed and learn more. And I believe that we tend to be our most emotionally intelligent when we are in a super minority in a room. And we are also our most candid when we are in a super majority. So there's some benefits to showing up in places that aren't designed for you to help you learn what are the issues at stake for people who don't have my same experience.
And do you have any recommendations in today's world? You know, it's a little bit different with everything being virtual, how people can effectively create diverse networks working in this virtual world?
Oh, I have so many ideas on that.
Oh,
So
great.
I actually have a whole video series. If I'll put the link to my YouTube channel in the chat in a moment, but I'm doing a whole video series, 52 tips for inclusive online networking, because I get that question so much. And I also have some courses on it online as well. The where I tell people to start is start scrolling through your feed. And how many people, like how far do you have to scroll before you see someone who doesn't look like you is a really good place to start. Start following people in your industry who are thought leaders who don't look like you or who don't look like traditional thought leaders in your industry. Follow the people that follow them, and, be a fly on the wall to those conversations without inserting your own opinion. Just listen for a very long time. And you will start to pick up on nuances of perspective. You'll start to pick up on where the obstacles and barriers are for different groups of people in your industry or even in your own organization. And then you can start to be an accomplice in helping dismantle some of those barriers.
Great. And yes, certainly we will link. So we send a follow-up email, and for everyone who's registered or here live, we will send a link to that YouTube channel. So
thank you.
Resources. So I know you mentioned a little bit earlier about leaders can and should be in every spot within an organization. And so how do emerging, aspiring DEI leaders specifically work to, make grassroots efforts for change?
So I think one of the best things to do is that we individually don't get caught up in our own struggles, that we're actually looking out for other people that maybe haven't gotten as far as we have, and start to think about why haven't they come as far as we have, and make sure that they get pulled up to where we are. Because if we're all in the same place, now we can all push forward together. But it's really hard to do that if you're up there by yourself, right? Trying to move through, a corporate environment, or, move through some systemic barriers. So my advice to people is, figure out where you are, but then look and see who's already been left behind from where you stand, and see what you can do to help them. I believe that when you stand for something other than yourself, especially in a corporate environment, people take notice, because so many people are so focused on their own journey, right? And that's not real leadership, right? Ambition and leadership are different. And so if you can help others and lift as you climb, that makes a huge difference in how other people perceive you. I also tell folks, you can't control everything that happens in an organization. You can't control everything that happens in the world. And I just invite the folks that are on the call, just imagine for a second that you have a hula hoop around you, in case you didn't bring one with you today. But if you hold that hula hoop out to your sides, right, you're responsible for everything that happens in that space. Every single thing that comes out of that hula hoop is in your control. And if you can make that hula hoop, just that 3-foot space around you, an inclusive space, people will follow you. And it's when people follow you that you become a leader. You don't need a title to do that. You don't need permission. You don't need, borrowed authority. You don't need somebody to deputize you to be a leader. You just start by making those 3 feet really inclusive. And really good things start happening.
Could you elaborate a little bit more on the difference between ambition and leadership?
Yeah, so I think some people are very ambitious because they want to achieve. And I certainly fall into that category, right? I'm high achieving and I want to do things because I like checking boxes. We talked about before the show, right? I love checklists and I like getting things done. And I have Post-it notes with all of my goals going up my wall so I can check them off once I reach them, right? That's ambition. Leadership is, wow, I would really like to get to a certain level in my business. Who can I bring with me? How can I make sure that my business is not just good for me, but good for the people around me, right? And in a corporate setting, you might say the same thing, right? I want to be, right, maybe I'm a manager and I want to make it to director. Okay, great. That's great for me. Who am I right now grooming to take over my role as manager? And is it the most obvious choice or is it the right choice? Because those aren't always the same thing, right? Maybe the person that sits closest to you isn't the best person for the job, or the person that looks the most like you isn't the best person for the job. And so, or, maybe we groom everybody on our team to take over our spot, right? And then you've got 6 people who are leadership or management ready when you move on, instead of focusing just on one person. So to me, that is leadership, the overlap of leadership and ambition, right? Or maybe you see somebody who you think has potential and you can even boost them up ahead of you, right? Talk about building goodwill for the rest of your career. If you can put somebody in that spot early.
Agreed. And as Amy and I are chatting, feel free to drop your questions for Amy in the chat. We will get to the Q&A in a little bit. Mm-hmm. But so please make sure to drop those so that you can get those questions answered. And I'd love to know, Amy, a little bit more about why DEI specifically is so you can be a leader from sitting in any position, but why is it that everyone in an organization also needs to be an advocate and be doing the work of DEI specifically?
Yeah, so I think DEI is a lot like quality, right? There's a quality center. Most organizations have a quality center, but quality is everyone's job. Ethics is everyone's job, right? And in the same way, I think diversity, equity, and inclusion is everyone's job. And I say that because the world has changed. Not that this wasn't important 100 years ago. It should have been, and it unfortunately, was not a priority. But if we look at kind of the evolution of leadership over time, it used to be very command and control because we were in more of a manufacturing economy, right? Then we moved into, kind of a different leadership model. There's more collaborative. Servant leadership came about, kind of like when I was first coming into the workforce, servant leadership was a big deal. But I think we've evolved again into inclusive leadership. And inclusive leadership is different. It's not just about, with servant leadership, you were there to serve the people that you support, right? With inclusive leadership, it's not just about serving the people that you support. It's about making sure that everybody can be in the room to begin with. The reason this is important for leaders is because it's important to companies. And let me explain that. The demographics in the United States are changing, first off. So we are not seeing the same talent pools and the same customer bases that we had 100 years ago, 50 years ago, 20 years ago. So companies are figuring out that they have to appeal to a broader client base, broader customer base, broader market segment, that their products and services have to meet different needs than they used to. In order to do that, they need people on the inside who understand those demographics and understand those experiences and the needs. So the talent pool is necessarily changing as well. In addition to that, we're becoming more global in the business community. So national borders don't mean what they used to in terms of doing business, right? We've got people on this call that I saw from the UK and, all over the United States and probably other countries as well. So we've become, Thomas Friedman was writing about the earth is flat, a couple decades ago, but truly those barriers are gone. So if we want to compete on a global stage, we need to do better about representing those global players inside our organizations. Now, the reason this is important for individual leaders is because a lot of leaders haven't figured this out yet, right? They're not thinking long-term. They're not thinking aligned with company strategy that's looking forward 20 or 50 years. So if we can, as individual leaders, be working with integrity, but also being inclusive and helping our companies find the talent and retain that talent early, right? And helping our companies connect with customers and client segments and market segments that we've not done a good job appealing to in the past. Now we have a competitive advantage within our own company compared to the other leaders around us. And so for those leaders who are leaders and ambitious, now's the time to get on board with us, because you can be at the front of the curve of adoption of inclusive leadership models compared to, the people that you're competing with for your next promotion.
And how can we, excuse me, going back to bring in the networking piece, how can we effectively network on a global stage? I agree, right now with everything virtual, it's a lot easier to be able to do that. I know for myself, I've been able to expand my network to a lot in the UK and Europe as a whole. And how can people best approach networking globally?
Yeah, so there are a lot of ways to do this. Social media is a great tool because you can search for people in different regions, right? You can go on LinkedIn and you can actually, search for people in your industry in a particular, country or part of the world. I find Twitter is a really great way to connect with people all over the world because Twitter's pretty asynchronous, but it's very personal. But then also many of us are involved in associations that are global in nature, or they have sister organizations in other parts of the world. And so even offline, we have opportunities to network with people who share common interests, right, in different parts of the world. So for example, I was approached recently by an international organization that, their chapters are country-based. So there's like a US chapter, right? There's a European chapter. There's a chapter in India. They've got chapters all over the world. They are right now promoting an event that I'm doing, and I'm getting requests from Dubai and India and, the Netherlands and all over the place because of that kind of reach. So, and if I can do that and I'm not part of the organization, right? Anybody can do that from within it. Just start connecting with people. Say, hey, I'm a member of this organization as well. I'd like to get to know you and what the issues are, that we're facing in this industry in China or Taiwan or, Yugoslavia or wherever, right? And then you can start to build your network that way and start collaborating more broadly than maybe you've thought of in the past. And now's a great time to do that because we're all stuck at home anyway. I mean, if everybody lives in your computer, then everybody's kind of on the same playing field, right?
Yeah, I am a huge fan of, well, being home is not great all the time. The doors that have opened and the ability to connect with people from all over the world that before it wasn't really possible. So I encourage all of you, if you haven't tried to network globally, I challenge you to do so.
I would add to that too, if I can, Natasha. And I didn't even realize that this was happening because I'm kind of naive about some things sometimes. But I was working on a global team a few years ago, and I thought that everybody I was working with spoke English. And then I found out they were actually using Google Translate to IM with me. And then I was really embarrassed because I thought that, I was the center of the universe, which I am not. As it turns out, I am not the center of the universe. But I learned a lesson in that we can use Google Translate or other translation software to help us communicate with people even across language barriers. So it becomes, and even on social media, there's usually a translate this post button or something like that. So, you can very quickly overcome not just national borders, but also language barriers in networking online. It's a lot easier to do that online than it is to do it in person, but.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up. And Mauricio, thank you for taking the challenge to network globally. Well, while we're talking about networking, I think it's important to talk about the aspect of fear that can come along with networking and meeting new people. Do you have any advice for individuals who fear networking and how to approach it and be a little more calm?
Yeah, so I was a very reluctant networker when I started. And the reason was I assumed when somebody said networking, I thought they meant sales and marketing. And that is not what networking is. So I actually have a slide in one of my presentations that has a guy selling cars. And I'm like, if this is what you think about networking, right, I'm here to change your mind, because it's not about, it's not about selling to people. It's not about dealing your business cards out like a blackjack dealer in Vegas, right? Networking is about building relationships for the long term that are mutually beneficial. And sometimes you have to find out, right, if there's a connection that's worth pursuing. And so, it's not always going to be like, you're not always going to find your perfect match, right? But a lot of times you can engage just long enough to figure out, can I help this person in the short term or the long term? And if so, how do we move forward with that? And so a lot of times people say, well, I'm an introvert, I don't like networking, it freaks me out. Okay, I get it. Introverts are actually sometimes the best networkers, because introverts listen. And most people are so busy talking, they don't stop to listen. So if you've got two people that are just talking at each other at an event, or you've got 50 people in a room and they're all talking at each other, and you're the one listening and being thoughtful and being present, you have a huge advantage over the other 50 people in the room. And there's no pressure to say anything, just listen.
Yeah, and Nika commented in the chat, networking is how I got to NWC. I am a great example, if you will, of what networking can really do to introduce you to new individuals that could very well lead you to your next job. So
yeah, networking is how everything gets done in our careers, first of all, right? Maybe your first job out of college, or, your first job, you went to a job fair and you found somebody and whatever. But pretty much everything after that comes from who knows you, who knows what you're capable of, and what relationships do you have. And it's not that different, right, in an organization. That's how work gets done in organizations, is through informal networks of people who, oh, I wonder if what we're doing is going to impact this other department. I'll go ask my friend over there. I need help because I don't have enough people on my team to accomplish X, Y, and Z. I'll go ask this executive if I can borrow somebody from their team, right? We do this all the time at work. We don't call it networking. It's just the way work gets done. But if we're intentional about it, we can actually get better results faster by doing what we're doing anyway, but with intent behind it.
And we're very pro intentionality, because you need intention to be inclusive, create cultures of belongingness. So thank you for bringing that word, and we talk about that a lot.
Yeah.
And how do we keep, genuineness in networking relationships? Because they are relationships, but how do we make sure that they're not just, what can I get from you? What can you get from me? And kind of build more on that and not just be solely transactional.
Yeah. So I always try to be the first to give. If there's somebody that if I meet someone new, I'm constantly thinking about, who can I introduce them to? What resources can I offer to them? How can I be of help? And we can do that one-on-one, or we can do that broadly, right? We can do that with our social media feeds, for example. If you see someone who's posted a job opening, repost it. If you see someone who's looking for a job, repost it, right? If you know two people that need to meet, introduce them. And you're not going to touch all of your connections every day. It doesn't work that way. But you can, spread out your interactions and your engagement, right? You can engage with other people's posts. You can leave comments. LinkedIn in particular has this great feature where if somebody gets promoted, or, they get a new job, or, they have an anniversary or whatever, it kind of prompts you to weigh in. You don't necessarily have to weigh in on that, but maybe make a note that in 3 or 4 days, you're going to follow up with them, right? And that kind of spreads it around a little bit, so that you're not lost kind of in the sea of, especially salespeople who tend to, jump in on those milestones. But, set a reminder on your calendar to follow up with that person in a week. And it doesn't have to be, that you're, offering them a job at your firm or something like that. It can just be like, hey, you've been on my mind for the past week or so. How's the new job going? Would you like to catch up?
And that reminds me, and Nika also said in the chat, make sure if you have not already, drop your LinkedIn, connect with some people here, maybe reach out and say, I'd love to do a virtual coffee chat. I met you via the Amy Waninger conversation. And so drop those in the chat. I will do the same. Actually, let me do that.
I just put mine in there. And that's a great networking tool, by the way. Anytime you're in meetings that are online like this, is always have your LinkedIn link ready to copy and paste right in so that you can connect with people, and then make sure, if you have the option to save the chat, always save the chat, go back and connect with anyone. When you connect, make sure people know how you met them, because that message history is saved forever in LinkedIn. And so a year from now, when that person pops up in your feed and you're like, how on earth did I meet Natasha? You'll know that you met her because of, an NWC event that you attended. So, and she'll know that too. So then if you need to refer people, or, you've got an opportunity, then you can remind yourself and each other, oh, remember we met at this time.
That's a great.
And Nika says the chat transcript will be provided in the follow-up email. Perfect.
Yes, we always provide that. So for anyone who is watching the replay or listening to the replay, make sure that you check out the chat so that you can connect with the people if you are unable to attend live. So we have gotten a number of questions in. I just want to remind everyone, if you haven't dropped your questions in the chat, you can do it via the chat or the Q&A. Go ahead and do that. We would love to get to those questions.
I saw that Mauricio said he's got he or they or she. Mauricio has a really long LinkedIn URL. You can actually go into LinkedIn in your profile settings and change that ending of your LinkedIn URL to be something that's meaningful or memorable. So, for example, mine is my full name. I see a lot of people have changed theirs to their full name and maybe some numbers. But you can actually do that so that it's easy to remember and you can type it in.
Do you have any other little quick tidbits or, best practices for whether it's LinkedIn or any other kind of avenue people can use while they're doing their networking journey?
So when we return to live events, which I believe will be in the next few months, LinkedIn actually has in their app, they have a tool where you can connect with everybody in the room. And so what I will do sometimes is, and I can tell you exactly where it is since you asked. If you go into your LinkedIn app, let's
all do it together.
I'll do it together. It won't work because we're not co-located, but if you go into your LinkedIn app and you hit the network at the bottom, and then there's this little blue dot that's like a person plus, you click that. And it doesn't say it because I'm not in a thing, but right in there it'll say like connect via Bluetooth, and then basically everybody that's like in your same room will show up there, and you can add everybody right away, which is really a great way to build your network. Then you can go follow up and say, hey, we were at the thing yesterday together, what did you take away? Or did you happen to catch the name of the caterer because the food was amazing, or whatever the thing is that you do to follow up, right? But that way you've got it in your message history where you met, and you're reaching out to further that connection. So it's not just that you were, ships passing in the night at a conference, but you actually, can take some time then to connect.
Well, yes, we'll keep that in our back pocket for once.
Yeah, that tool has done me no good for the last 14 months. So, but someday it'll have its moment again.
Someday. Well, I'm going to go ahead and switch to some of the questions just because I want to make sure we can get to them. Sure. They're really great so far. So the first one was actually from Mauricio. Mauricio asks, how do you address individuals who go out of their way to discourage or impede teammates in non-managerial roles to be a leader in an organization? How do you start to break those barriers down?
So I don't know. I don't know if I've ever seen that firsthand. I mean, there are always people who are kind of like turfy, right, in an organization. And I think it just starts with a conversation, right? If you can facilitate the conversation, or you can encourage the two people who are in conflict to have a conversation around what are their intentions around the interaction. Sometimes, right, we think that a manager or, a titled leader is telling us not to do something because they feel threatened, when in fact, they're telling us not to do something because it's out of alignment with some other goal or initiative in the organization, and they're trying to protect us. So don't assume why someone's doing what they're doing. Ask. And then, also I think it's important to make sure that everybody's needs are being met. So if somebody is really compelled to drive an initiative forward, or they're really passionate about making sure everybody feels included, find out what's driving that and see how you can channel that productively so that everyone benefits from it, right? People are always making decisions that make sense to them, or they're always doing things that make sense to them from within their own internal lens, right? And sometimes people just can't help but do the things that they do. I mean, I'm a Gallup certified strengths coach, and one of the things that we learn in coaches training is people are wired a certain way, and that they have needs that need to be fed, and they're going to behave in ways that feed those needs. So if you have someone who just can't help but be a certain way, figure out how do you channel that so that everyone benefits, rather than it being a problem for them or for the team. Because what happens is when we try to squash what people are naturally great at, they become very disengaged, and they can actually start working against the team's interest and against their own self-interest pretty quickly.
And we are really big fans of Gallup StrengthsFinder over here. One of my friends, actually, who's on the call, Ryan Hance, is also a certified Gallup Strengths coach. So,
yay, Ryan. Awesome.
So great to hear that. Our next question comes from Lenroy. Lenroy asked, hi, Amy, can you share more about leveraging the use of your calendar to network effectively?
Yes. So there are a number of tools online. Some of them are free. Some of them are paid. Some of them have different, different structures depending. I use Calendly. I switched to Calendly because it's a Black-owned business. And so I wanted to support Calendly. They also had some features that I really liked. But you can usually set up just a free account. And when you've had an interaction with somebody and they want to talk to you, oh, maybe we could do coffee sometime, you can just give them the link to your Calendly or whatever tool you use, whether it's Acuity or some other tool. One of the things that I have found really valuable, though, is to go and get a custom domain. You can use domains.google.com to get your own domain. And then you can use that and redirect it to your Calendly link. So, for example, you might have like schedulewithnatasha.com that redirects to your Calendly link. And then it's really easy to, put that in the chat, something you can remember rather than having to go copy and paste every time you want to, the really long URL problem again, right? But I found that's been great because then, number one, I get to actually sit down and talk to the person, and then I have a name and a face and a story, which cements them in my brain a little bit better. But also, I have their email address. I have their other contact information as well. I can ask questions about why do they want to meet so that I have a memory jogger for that conversation. And Calendly even lets you take notes in the app about what you talked about. So if there's any question, later you're like, okay, who was that? You can go back and search and find that. So I think it's a great tool, especially now while we're all virtual. And it saves a lot of time, especially like even in my own city, people say, do you want to meet for coffee? No, I don't drive across town for coffee, but we can meet online because I can do that in a very short period of time.
Yeah, I am a big Calendly advocate over here. I use it religiously, essentially. So if you're not using Calendly or something similar, I recommend doing it. And you can also, within Calendly, you can brand it to your own brand or your own company, or if you work for an organization. So I'm actually going to drop my Calendly just so you can see as an example what it looks like for anyone. And you can see that once you click to schedule a meeting, it shows the Nika White Consulting logo. So yes, if you don't have Calendly or something similar, check it out. Okay, so this next question, and thank you for your response.
Of course.
This next question was from Nika, actually. For those who get inundated with networking meetings to the point where it's hard to say yes to them all, how do you manage a consistent influx of requests in a way that is mindful of feelings of others? And Frank also said same question, and I also have the same question.
Yeah. So here's one of the beautiful things about Calendly. You can time box it. So you can say, I'm only available on Tuesdays from 1 to 4. And if people want to meet with me, they need to find a time between 1 and 4 on Tuesdays. And that's it. That's the only times I'm going to be available for these kinds of meetings. And so then you know that Tuesdays from 1 to 4 are your networking time, right? And if people want to meet with you, they may have to schedule a ways out. Now, you may have other options for clients or that sort of, for clients or prospective clients or, people that you're better connected with. But you can just set up like one specific meeting. I call mine Get Acquainted. And I just, time box it to, this is when I'm available for these kinds of meetings. And that way, it's kind of first in, first out, but it's also, respectful of other people's calendars. And I will say that sometimes people get a little testy because they're like, well, you don't have a meeting until, 2 months from now. Yeah, I'm really busy, but I really look forward to talking to you in April or whenever. Right. Nobody gets to demand your time. And I think, so speaking specifically to women, we tend to get a lot of not just demands on our time, but demands of our time, where people think that they should have access to us when they want it. And I've found that Calendly helps me protect my time. I'll have people, I never take meetings on Mondays, for example, and I'll have people that get really, in a snit because I don't meet on Mondays. That's my time to frame out my week, to figure out what my to-do list is, to make sure that, I've got everything laid out the way I need it. And, I say, no, not available. My calendar's up to date. Find something that works for you. And it makes it really easy for me then to put boundaries around my networking time and other demands as well.
And I'd love to expand a little bit more about that, because specifically boundaries right now are potentially more important because we have the ability to be on and be connected 24 hours a day. It's not just within the 9 to 5 time frame anymore. How can we intentionally create those boundaries for ourselves? And what's the importance of it? I know you mentioned a little bit, your boundaries are saying I will only take calls of 1 to 4 or not on Mondays. But if you have any other boundaries that you could recommend or their importance.
Yeah, I use out of office a lot. If I'm taking a day off, if I'm taking a vacation, done. I don't respond. And I think we train people to treat us, however we will accept, right? So if you, for example, don't take meetings on Mondays, I never take meetings on Mondays. Now, if it's an emergency and I really need to, and it benefits me, there's like this whole decision tree that I go through, but I get to decide. And, the same thing with emails, right? You just don't respond. Or, you can use features in Gmail that actually you can respond in the moment, but you can schedule the email to send later. So even if you are responding on a Saturday night, it doesn't look like you're responding until Monday morning. And I find that very helpful too, because then people don't expect you to have this back and forth conversation with them all weekend. Nika mentioned having an executive assistant or a virtual assistant. That's always a good option. And you can usually get really good help for, a pretty reasonable fee. I mean, you're going to pay for their time, obviously, and you want to compensate them fairly. But if your time is at a premium, that can be very helpful as well to, just say, hey, talk to my assistant about scheduling me. I prefer to automate things because then I don't have to ramp people up and, but I use a lot of tools for that.
Yes. And boundaries are important. And the word no is important. So remember that, everyone.
Yes. Oh, hey, I'll share another thing that I do for people who struggle with this. I actually set up a website. So if you get pick your brain requests, I don't know how many of you are, if you can tell me in the chat, do people contact you and say, I just want to pick your brain about? I have a website called pickamysbrain.com. Don't go there, but I have a website called pickamysbrain.com. And when somebody asks if they can pick my brain, it takes them to a Calendly link where they have to pay $150 to talk to me. So that's coaching, that's consulting, that's my time. You're asking me for information or for guidance or whatever. And so because I hate that phrase so much, I have made a commitment to myself that if somebody uses that phrase, they get sent to the paid Calendly link where they actually have to pay for my time, and it's in their own words, so they can't even really get too mad about it. Right?
But don't
Put
go
it on
to
a shirt.
don't go to pickamysbrain.com.
You can go there if you want to pick my brain. You can go to pickamysbrain.com, and I will be happy to talk to you for a half an hour about whatever you want to talk about. But there, like Nika said, there is a cost to picking my brain. It is not for free. I have spent a lot of money filling my brain with the stuff that's in it, and I intend to guard that very carefully, just like I would my bank account. So
great. Yeah. And is that boundary again in saying like, no, if you want to pick my brain, you're going to have to pay for it. So yeah. Thank you for sharing that. This next question comes from Lauren on our team. She says, how do you move past rejection or people ignoring you? On LinkedIn, it's understandable as people are flooded with requests and choose to ignore, but those who are trying to break in may feel frustrated and give up. How do we change our perception around ignored invites to connect?
Oh gosh, I get ignored all the time. Just do more of it. Just do more. Just, if you swing your bat enough times, you're going to hit something, right? And so just keep. I'm sorry, I just saw Mauricio said I will go to Amy's Pick Your Brain site and use my mother-in-law's card. I saw nothing. I know nothing. I'm just going to put my hands over my ears and pretend I didn't see it. But no, I mean, yeah, we're all going to get rejected, right? I'm not going to be friends with Oprah. Let's just be clear, right? I would love to be friends with Oprah. She's not going to take my calls, and that's okay. I get it. She's got other stuff to do. And everybody's got their Oprah level, right? My Oprah level is probably way below Oprah. There are people that are not going to call me back. That's okay. But I can focus on the people who will and see, how far can we get together, with the people that do want to talk to me. And, we got to get out of this lunch table mentality, right? That there's a cool kids table and that we all have to be at that table. No, you sit down with the people that are excited to talk to you. You sit down with the people that you're excited to hear from and see what you can build together. And don't worry about what all the other tables are talking about or doing. Like, there's just so much opportunity out here for all of us. And I don't feel like any of us should fight to be anywhere. Like, there's so much available, and there are so many places where, if somebody, and it may not even be a no, it may just be that they don't check their LinkedIn very often, right? Maybe that's just not where they hang out. And so you're knocking on the door and they're not home. You don't know.
Yeah, that's a great point. I know for myself, another added level when I am trying to network, maybe with somebody more on that Oprah level, not quite Oprah, but my Oprah level. Specifically, if I see someone who's a keynote speaker at an event or something like that, I always connect with a message and I say, hey, so-and-so, I heard you speak at X conference and I really appreciated when you talked about this. And I try to throw in that note to be as personal as possible, because, that's my opportunity to put the foot in the door, as opposed to just sending a blind connection request, to give a little bit of context there. And try to
absolutely. Yeah. And something that I did early on, when I didn't have, 14,000 connections on LinkedIn or 20,000 connections on Twitter, was I would find people who I admired in my space. And I'll give an example. Howard Ross is, one of the people in the DEI space. I bought his book. I read it. I liked it, wrote a review. And then I started tweeting my review and a link to where you could buy his book, right? You can promote other people and tag them in it. Now, don't do it excessively, but you can do it occasionally. And if you do that consistently over time, right, and you pace it appropriately, people will notice. And I've done that with a lot of thought leaders in this space when I was just starting out, because I was like, I don't know, I don't have anything to offer, but if I read a good book, I can share it with people. If I go to a conference and saw somebody speak and they did a great job, I can recommend them, right? There are so many ways we can kind of like get ourselves into that, into those echelons of people that maybe we don't have access to right now. But I mean, if you spend 2 years promoting somebody's work and then they don't take your call, that's rude. Stop promoting their work, right? So like you can sort of you can kind of build that relationship just by helping that person get visible or just by endorsing them.
Yeah, and that's a great point as well. If you're reading an author's book and you're like, I want to reach out or I want to promote their work so that other people are aware they could see it. So, be as personal as you can and really try. And like you said, if after 2 years they don't want to talk to you, then maybe just stop.
Yeah. So, well, you have Karen Catlin coming, right, for your book club. So if everybody buys her book and takes a picture, here's how to get on Karen Catlin's radar. Grab her book, take a selfie, post it on Twitter, post it on LinkedIn. I'm part of this book club with @Karen Catlin. Register here, right? Now you're doing some promo for her. She's seen your name, right? Then after the event, you take a screenshot of the thing and say, hey, this was a great event. Really loved it. Thanks, Karen, for your book and your insights. There you go. You're going to make a friend.
You are. Great advice. Lauren said in the chat, and I'm just echoing it. Great advice.
Oh, I love this. So I'm going to read this if it's okay. Nika says, interesting story. Amy and I finally connected live after following each other on social media for a long time. When I posted something like, I'm after impact, who is with me and ready to make something happen? Amy responded with a personal message. Yeah. I stalked you for a while, Dr. White. And I have people like that too, that they say, I watched you for a year before I contacted you. And, you don't know who's watching. You don't know where your name is being spoken. And, she stalked me too. Thank you. But yeah, I mean, you just never know who's watching. So, that's both a promise and a threat, right? You got to be careful what you put out there. You need to be intentional about what you put out there because there are people who are watching. But I've gotten a lot of opportunities off my social media feeds. Some of my biggest clients have come from people I met on Twitter.
So everyone, start ramping up your Twitter usage if you have not yet already.
Yeah.
Well, we have one more question, and I think this is a great question to end on. This one's from Kira. If you're intentionally reaching out to people who come from different backgrounds, how can you start to go deeper / connect as a part of a virtual coffee appointment that can sometimes be superficial?
So, yeah, you don't start out in the first conversation with somebody, asking their life story. You don't go deep on controversial topics, right? Manners still apply. But if you have a history of advocating for people in public, people will open up to you faster in those groups that you're advocating for or that you're aligning yourself with. So, you have to show up for people before they're going to show up for you. And I think that, I've had people that have contacted me and said, I've been watching you for a while. I want to talk to you about a problem I'm having at work. Can you help me solve it? Right. That, because I had an outside perspective that they didn't have, they were too close to the issue or whatever. So yeah, there's no reason to go deep on meeting one, but you build these relationships over time. I mean, the people that you're friends with, you weren't friends with immediately, right? You've got shared experiences, you've got things that you've done together or that, you've been through, or they were there for you when you were struggling, right? And online relationships are no different. In fact, they probably take longer to build that trust because you've got more distance, physically and socially between you. So, it's not like I wouldn't try to unpack somebody's whole life in meeting one, right? But you can start to kind of lay some foundation, start telling your stories, right? Why is this work important to you? Why are you, why did you reach out? What are you struggling with? What help do you need? Right? Asking for help is a really vulnerable thing. But if done the right way, it can really build trust quickly.
And I wanted to share this comment from Mauricio that brought me a lot of joy. He said, the one-on-one on how to connect with me. Go out to a good local taco place. Take a selfie with a taco. Tag me and type, you would love this place. Done.
I love it.
So if you're not connected with Mauricio already,
All right.
you've got your how-to on that.
Mauricio needs a taco-themed social media platform.
Yes.
Oh, we could do that. It could be Taco About It with Mauricio, and we could have a whole feed going about tacos. I'm down. I love tacos.
Same. Well, we are almost out of time. We have just a minute left. Before we wrap up today, is there any last, piece of wisdom or information or content you'd like to share with us before we wrap up today, Amy?
Yeah, I would just reiterate to everyone, we all believe our hearts to be in the right place, but your heart can't be in the right place if you never move your feet. So take the steps you need to take to build the relationships that are going to truly matter.
I think that's a beautiful way to end the conversation. So thank you so much, Amy. Thank you, everyone, for being here today. Again, come back next week, same time, same place, with David Ryan Castro, who is our guest for next week. And that will be hosted by Nika. And until then, enjoy your weekends and the rest of your weeks. And thank you so much all for being here. Bye, everyone.
Bye. Thank you.